I have to say, the news I'm looking at this week about Apple is, it's just highly uncharacteristic. You have a company that's projecting what I believe will be record holiday revenues, right? Something approaching $140 billion. And yet they've decided to surgically cut dozens of roles in a really key area, their direct sales team. This isn't a reaction to a bad quarter. No, this is a calculated strategic move, and it signals a fundamental shift that investors simply must understand.
Welcome to DeepResearchGlobal.com podcast.
So my goal here is to really unpack this specific restructuring. I want to analyze exactly which parts of the sales force were impacted, what the official line is, and, critically, what this tells us about their long-term strategy for enterprise education and government. This is all about strategic efficiency, the kind of move you only see when a management team is confident enough to fine-tune a machine that's, already printing money.
Right. And when I look across the rest of tech, these kinds of cuts have become almost routine. You just look at Verizon, Synopsys, IBM, Amazon, Meta. Mass layoffs are, unfortunately, pretty normalized now. But for Apple, I maintain that job cuts are viewed as the absolute last resort. That reluctance is it's deep in their corporate culture. They'd much rather move people internally or slow down hiring. And that's precisely what makes this so significant. Cutting dozens of sales jobs now, with record revenues on the horizon, it's startling.
It is. It's that paradox that really gets my attention. This move just doesn't fit the established Apple playbook. Usually when Apple downsizes, it's because a huge project got killed, like we saw with the self-driving car. Or maybe they're optimizing services. But this.
Reducing the very team that manages high-value contracts, that suggests they're trying to fix a structural issue, not plug a financial hole. And the company has officially confirmed these changes. But I believe they're being very, very careful with the optics. The spokesperson, when they addressed this, framed it as a minor thing. The official quote was, "To connect with even more customers, we are making some changes in our sales team that affect a small number of roles." Quote. They were also really quick to add that they are continuing to hire and that the affected employees can apply for other jobs internally.
My read on that is that they're positioning it inside the company as just a cleanup effort, streamlining the workforce, getting rid of what they see as overlapping jobs, maybe too many account managers for the same clients. The stated goal, of course, is to strengthen customer engagement by making the whole process faster, more nimble.
And if we step back, the context is really the key insight for you, the investor. This push for streamlining is happening when the December quarter could hit a record $140 billion in revenue. This isn't desperation. This is a margin expansion strategy. It tells me these cuts are driven purely by a strategic desire for efficiency. They're optimizing for tomorrow's profitability, not reacting to today's problems.
And that's the essential takeaway here. When a company is this successful, a surgical cut like this implies management has found a major inefficiency in how they go to market. All right, so let's get specific. Where exactly did these cuts land? My understanding is this wasn't a general sweep. It was laser-focused.
Absolutely. The targets were very precise. We're talking about account managers who handle contracts for major businesses, large schools, and government agencies. These are complex, multi-million-dollar deals, not your average consumer sale.
Yeah.
And to really underscore how high stakes these roles are, we saw that staff operating Apple's briefing centers were also affected.
And for anyone who doesn't know, why are those briefing centers so important?
Well, think of them as Apple's institutional temples. They're dedicated, very high-security spaces where Apple brings in its biggest clients. Major corporate CIOs, university presidents, defense officials. They're vital for demos, for technical deep dives, and most importantly, for building that deep institutional trust you need to sign those massive multi-year contracts. Cutting the staff there tells me they're fundamentally changing the way they engage with these big customers.
And within this, I really want to zoom in on the government sales team. My reports indicate this team, which handles huge contracts with agencies like the Defense Department and the Justice Department, was a major target.
That team was already dealing with some pretty severe external headwinds. That made them vulnerable. Yeah. I remember they had to navigate that long 43-day government shutdown, which it froze all non-essential federal buying.
Yeah.
When you lose 43 days of deal making, that puts immense pressure on your sales targets.
But there's another layer of pressure there, and I think it's critical for investors to get this. They were also dealing with cutbacks from something called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. This wasn't just a normal budget review. DOGE was a real concerted federal push to slash spending on outside vendors and tighten IT budgets everywhere.
So this specific team was really facing a perfect storm.
Exactly. That combination, political gridlock, slowing things down, plus a new federal mandate to save money, it made that government sales unit a logical place to look for savings. And I have to remind listeners, Apple has done this before. The cuts earlier in 2024 with the car project cancellation and the AI reshuffle, it shows that Apple is absolutely ruthless about shedding headcount when they spot a chance for more efficiency. So now we get to the core of it all, the really crucial part for investors, which is the strategic mechanism that's driving this. And I see a real difference in the explanations we're getting. Right. You have Apple's official line, optimization, streamlining, removing overlap. But the intelligence I've gathered and what you hear from affected people, it all suggests a deeper, more profound shift is happening.
My reading of it is that many of the affected employees, they believe the main driver here is an effort to push more sales through third-party resellers, what we all refer to in the tech world as the channel.
And if that's true, it's a pure financial calculation. Using those indirect sellers lets Apple dramatically lower internal costs.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about avoiding the high fixed costs of a huge direct sales force. Salaries, bonuses, benefits, travel, and the real estate for those fancy briefing centers.
That's exactly where the margin boost comes from. By shifting those fixed costs over to the channel, Apple turns its sales expense into a variable cost, a commission or a discount that's paid only when a reseller actually closes a sale. It improves the company's cost structure in these areas so much.
But doesn't that raise the question of control? Why would Apple, a company famous for controlling every single part of the customer experience, why would they give that up to a third party?
That's a fair question, but you have to see it from the enterprise customer's view. I find that in government and education, these big organizations often already prefer to work with those established resellers. Why? Because the channel partners provide services Apple just doesn't want to manage. Things like large-scale IT integration, custom financing, long-term maintenance, on-site support. For a university or a defense agency, that full-service package is often more valuable than a direct line to Apple.
So you're reframing it. It's not just shedding cost, it's outsourcing complexity. What really strikes me, though, is the human side of this. These weren't junior employees. Reports say these cuts hit people who had been with Apple for 20 or even 30 years.
And that longevity just underscores how serious this shift is. When you cut employees with 2 or 3 decades of institutional knowledge, this isn't a short-term fix. This is a deliberate, long-term channel strategy. It signals a major change in how Apple weighs employee loyalty against pure operational efficiency.
And this is absolutely coming from the top. I mean, you have to remember the sales group reports directly to Tim Cook. It's overseen by Mike Wenger. And Vivek Thakur took on expanded duties this year to oversee all enterprise and education sales. This just confirms my belief. This is a C-suite directive to maximize efficiency. For the employees who are impacted, I'm tracking a very controlled timeline, which is, it's very Apple. They were notified recently, but they have a clear window. They have until January 20th to find another job inside the company.
And if they don't find a new role by that deadline, they'll be terminated, but with a severance package. This measured, targeted approach is really what sets Apple apart from the rest of the tech sector, which often just does these sudden, huge layoffs.
And that targeted approach is completely strategic. Tim Cook has always said layoffs are a last resort. By targeting cuts surgically, dozens here, hundreds there, and avoiding those big announcements, Apple manages to avoid triggering the large-scale WARN notices required by U.S. labor law.
That is a critical piece of insight for investors. For those who don't know, the WARN Act requires companies to give 60 days notice for mass layoffs. By keeping the numbers just below that threshold, Apple accomplishes 2 crucial things. 1, they protect their carefully built image as an employee-focused company. And 2, they avoid the negative press and regulatory scrutiny that comes with those filings.
It lets them keep up that controlled, almost surgical image of how they manage people, even while they're making a huge strategic change. It's all about controlling the narrative and the cost structure at the same time.
Indeed. It just shows management's controlled hand on the efficiency levers. The earlier cuts in 2024 with the car project were handled in the exact same way. Managed reductions, not sudden dismissals. The message is clear. Efficiency is the priority, but the process will be managed meticulously to limit any reputational damage.
So as we wrap up, what's the ultimate conclusion for you, the investor, as you're tracking Apple moving into 2025?
I conclude my analysis by summarizing this key point. This restructuring, happening even with record revenues in sight, it confirms management's laser-like focus on operational efficiency. I believe they are aggressively shifting resources away from expensive direct sales teams in B2B and government, and they're committing much harder to the lower-cost, scalable model of third-party channel partners. My firm belief is that this is fundamentally a powerful cost control measure. It's positioned to significantly boost future margin performance in these specific markets, even if the top-line revenue stays consistent.
And that insight into future margin expansion in the B2B space is crucial for the long-term valuation of their enterprise business.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to deepresearchglobal.com for more latest business news briefs, company analysis, and investment insights.